Warning: this video contains spoilers for the new Superman movie. Watch at your own. Howdy, Space Rangers, Captain Phoenix here, and today we are talking about James Gunn's Superman. For so long, I have been waiting for a Superman property that respects the character, makes him engaging and relatable to the general audience, and at the end of the day, touches the humanity inside us all. Now, don't get me wrong, we've had some great Superman projects in recent years. My Adventures with Superman is a delightful show, and Superman and Lois made me cry on more than one occasion. But both of these never broke through into the mainstream. James Gunn's movie, no matter how you viewed it, was going to be big. It was the first solo live-action Superman movie we had in 12 years. It would set the tone of the new DC universe, and it would be James Gunn's big test to prove if he could make a Superman film that could rival and potentially overshadow the effect Man of Steel had on the character. So, after all the waiting and all the hype, is this film the cinematic masterpiece we were all hoping it would be? Well, not exactly. But honestly, given how much was riding on this movie, I don't think it would have satisfied everyone's expectations. The highlights, though, vastly outweigh the cons. Let's start with some of my favorite things from this movie. First to come to mind is the world building. I love how this world is already established and that metahumans have been around for 300 years. Throwing the audience headfirst into this world was the right call. You get to see glimpses of how the average people live their lives and how the occasional crisis is walked past and ignored. I would have liked to see the public's countermeasures towards the regular attacks, especially since supernatural stuff has been happening for 300 years. You'd think that regular humans would have not only gotten used to these kind of things, but found ways around them, but I guess that's just me overthinking things. Anyway, this is a great way to stand apart from the MCU and old DCEU. While the MCU is all about the rise of super people and introducing them to the normal world in a realistic way, Superman dives headfast into the fantastical comic book aspects of its world while still keeping audiences engaged. By the way, before I continue, I just want to give a huge shout out to both Cosmonaut Variety Hour and Captain Midnight. I am using their edited clips from the movie for this video because Warner Brothers likes to constantly copyright me, even though I don't use any of their music in my videos. Maybe there's like a 5-second clip I'll use in this one, assuming again they don't copyright me for that one. But like, yeah, it's, I don't use any of your music and I'm providing constructive criticism and insight. Like, get off my case, WB. Regardless, thank you to those two channels and I will link them down in the description below. Anyway, Superman's world building. This is wonderfully shown in the threats and concepts the movie deals with. We also the giant monster from the trailer, but there's also a segment of the movie that's inside a pocket dimension, and I thought that was really creative, though I didn't like the drawn-out action scene to get out. We also got super soldiers and Ultraman who, while having a very predictable reveal, does have a cool presence in the film. All this high concept stuff is wonderfully married to the more grounded conflict Superman deals with, such as the war between Boravia and Jaranpour. I'll go into it a bit, but I love how Superman doesn't care for bureaucracy or all the boring paperwork. He just cares about helping people and saving as many lives as possible, no matter who or where they are. Back to the pocket dimension, there's a scene where we see that Lex has an army of monkeys that spread irrational Superman hate on the internet. This is clearly a reference to rage betas invading internet spaces such as Twitter and Reddit, and I absolutely adore that little snippet. Anytime I get into an argument with a rage beta, I'm just going to assume it's one of Lex's monkeys on the other side. The movie could have so easily felt overbloated by the amount of villains present, but the relevant ones got their screen time and the ones who are meant to serve as obstacles stayed as such. If the climax did feel all over the place to you, I assure you that was intentional. It was supposed to represent how Lex was trying to spread Superman as thin as possible and that only a team effort could bring him down. However, this leads me to my first major complaint. This movie throws a lot of stuff at you and goes by really fast. Now, you guys know me. I love when superhero movies focus on the superhero part of their concept, and I've also stated in the past that I have more of a preference for faster paced stuff. However, even an ADHD freak like me can admit that this movie goes by concepts and themes way too fast. The movie literally starts with Superman losing a fight for the first time ever as a superhero, possibly in his life, and we get no reaction or reflection from him about this. I get why he would brush it off at first and get back into the fight without thinking, as his main focus is just protecting as many people as possible. But later on, you'd think that he would grapple with the reality that someone out there is just as, if not more stronger than him. Obviously, he's met other strong characters before, like his cousin, but this is the first fight that he's ever lost. A bit more emphasis on that would have helped. Same thing applies to his parents' reveal. Superman finds out that Krypton wasn't the nice planet we've come to see in past iterations. This time, they seem to be a low-key conqueror planet with a mindset similar to the Viltrumites from Invincible. Clark doesn't really react to this life-shattering information till the third act, which is way too long in movie time. We also don't get a really good look into Clark's life. Now, don't get me wrong, I know this isn't an origin movie and anyone watching it most likely already knows Superman, but we get so little of his personal life in this film. Outside the one scene at the Daily Planet and Clark's interview with Lois, there's not much there. Most of the Daily Planet gang feel like background characters with their own mini side plot as they don't really interact with Superman or his adventures. The only one who does some heavy lifting aside from Lois is Jimmy, who uses his connection to Eve test marker to gain some dirt on Lex. But again, he doesn't really seem to know her through Superman, not even indirectly. And that's the thing, Jimmy and Clark don't interact a lot in this movie. If this is your first time ever seeing a Superman project, you would never assume that these two are best friends. As I said before, I do like that this movie decided to focus more on the superheroics than CW drama, but it definitely feels like they overcorrected in some areas. The movie would have definitely benefited from more slower emotional scenes, like the one with Pa Kent in the third act. Speaking of which, can we give this movie the flowers it deserves for actually having Superman act human? Not godlike, not extra quirky, but a guy who literally struggles to get out of bed like all of us depressed adults, yet still chooses to be the goodest of good guys. This man is a role model not just for younger audiences who will have this as their first Superman experience, but for older people to learn that we can all afford to be a little kinder. David Cornswell's performance adds a certain complexity to the character while retaining what makes him lovable. Superman does everything he can to save people and make sure that they are safe during a crisis. That is his number one priority. And at times, it honestly feels like a funny clapback to how Zack Snyder treated him. He even saves a goddamn squirrel at one point. This man's care for the well-being of others is honestly otherworldly. And all of this is not even mentioning his involvement in the Boravia and Jaranpur War. While I wish we actually got to see Superman on the battlefield, the impact he left on the country is felt. When that little kid and his friends held up the flag begging for Superman, I got misty-eyed, dog. These are the innocent lives Clark cares so deeply for, and it makes you wish you had his powers to end all the world's conflicts. And I love how Clark's optimism and kindness rubs off on the Justice Gang. I wasn't fully happy with how the gang were handled in this movie, but I really appreciated the fact that the movie showed that Clark, despite all his power, is human deep down and can't be everywhere all at once, so they decide to help out. Metamorpho showing up to repay Superman's kindness was inspiring, and Guy Gardner's "you got an upgrade" line was a great levity joke. I think it's also important to note that the Jaranpurans don't treat him like a god, but an answer to their dire situation, as he helped them the last time. Some could see the scene as a bit too worshipy, but the movie flips that mentality by showing that Superman genuinely could not make it and the Justice Gang had to step in. Superman's character is also perfectly reflected in the message his parents left him. After finding out that his parents wanted him to be a conqueror, Clark has his little breakdown wondering who he is and what the message says about his existence. But Pa Kent in the movie basically tell him that it doesn't matter what the message said. What matters is what Clark thought it said and what he wanted to be from it. That speaks more about his character than anyone could attempt to. This is a good man. Speaking of that change, I'm not mad that Clark's parents are evil in this universe. It makes sense that the elves would want to see their lineage continue in any shape or form after their planet was destroyed. Plus, it plays into the themes of the movie as I just explained. The only thing that might be weird is how they tackle Supergirl's connection to the planet in her movie, since her original story actually revolves around her growing up on Krypton until she was a teenager, thus would have more memories about the planet and would mourn it more than Clark would. So that could be an interesting, concept for conflict later on, but at the same time, it seems that Clark and Kara are on good terms, so I don't know how they're going to work through that. Backtracking to the Justice Gang and Jaranpur, I have complex feelings about the climax. On the one hand, I am disappointed that Superman wasn't able to pull one last hurrah and swoop in at the last second. On the other hand, I get why they did things this way. Superman already ended the war before the movie began, and it would have been redundant to have him show up in the climax again. It was also done to give the Justice Gang something to do. I get that the movie wanted to show that they were so inspired by Superman's kindness and genuineness that they decided to help despite their hesitation earlier, but I never got that sense from Green Lantern and Hawkgirl. Metamorpho is the only one whose appearance perfectly fit what the scene was going for. This ties into another issue I have, and that is that we don't get much interaction with Superman and the Justice Gang outside of Mr. Terrific. I'm pretty sure Lois had more interaction with them. I would have loved more of Superman warming them up to what it means to be a hero instead of them changing their minds off screen. I really did enjoy Green Lantern in this film, but he and Hawkgirl really suffer from a lack of screen time and character development. Though, with that said, I stand the person who decided to cast Isabella Merced as Hawkgirl. Freaking give them a raise. Anyway, because of the lack of depth, I don't really see these guys as potential Justice League members yet, outside of, again, Mr. Terrific. Though with that said, there are characters that do shine in this movie. As mentioned, Mr. Terrific was great. I thought people were overhyping him, but looking back, James Gunn did a spectacular job bringing this relatively unknown character to the big screen. Most of the core cast were also handled well, like Lois and Metamorpho, but none had as much presence as Lex Luthor himself. Every scene with this man was just straight up hating. He radiated pure hater energy to the point we just had to acknowledge the pajama fit in some scenes. I'm not too sure about Nicholas Hoult in the role just yet, but then again, no live action Lex Luthor has impressed me outside the guy from the Supergirl shows. So, take that what you will. This movie is also jam-packed with details and Easter eggs. Not only will you need to know quite a bit about Superman before going into this film, but I'm pretty sure there's some stuff in here that only nerds would figure out. There were a couple of cameos in here that surprised me and the audience I was in the theater with. Very nice bonding moment, by the way. We all just collectively gasped at the same time. I do think the movie being packed with so much stuff does give it a lot of rewatch value though. And I would like to rewatch this movie at the very least to refresh my mind and give it a better shake. As a whole product, I take it to be a celebration of DC, where it's come from and where it's going next. Because if you compare this movie to the 78 one, we would have never had all these Easter eggs and other heroes showing up. Yet now we do because of the success of that movie. It's a nice little sentiment that I'm not sure is shared among the community or if I came up with it myself, but it is what it is. In the end, Superman 2025 is a movie that perfectly understands Superman and brings some color back into the world. It's a movie that knows how to set up a universe right after a bit of trial and error and shows that talent and passion can still be present in the process. It's not without its flaws though. The pacing is very messy and a lot of the characters lack the depth to make them truly stick with the audience, but it's able to just barely cross the finish line and deliver its point. Great Superman movie and great start to the DCU, but a messy yet fun flick. 8 out of 10. Anyway guys, that's going to be all from me today. Tell me, what did you think of Superman? Was it good? Was it bad? Was it everything you hoped for? Or do you think they needed to cook some more? What were your favorite and least favorite parts of the movie? Let me know down in the comments below. And as always, let's have a discussion. Thank you guys very much for watching. Be sure to like if you like, subscribe if you haven't already, hit the notification bell to be part of the team, slap a cow. And with that, I've been Captain Phoenix and I will see you in another universe. Goodbye, my Rangers.